Welcome to the Purple Wave of Northern Kentucky. I am Carolyn Hankins Wolfe, your Division I elected member on the Boone County Board of Education. And today I am being joined by Jerry Gels of Ignite Institute. Jerry, thank you for joining me today to talk about Ignite.
Thank you for having me.
So as a school board member, I get a lot of questions about Ignite, and I've come to realize that a lot of people really do not understand what Ignite is and its mission and its role in public education. So I'd like to start from the beginning, like find out what the backstory of Ignite is, because it does get watered down. Generally, what I do hear is it was a building donated by Toyota, and that's how it started. And that's not the case. So I was hoping
Right.
you could tell us about the birth of Ignite.
Yeah. In 2014, 15, I was hired and ran. I was hired for the alternative school that Joe Hibbett now leads. And when I was in that position, one of the things that you had to do is you had to write. What do you see as a school of the future? Like no walls, no windows. Just what are the kind of things that you would do? And this was the big thing from Dr. Poe and Dr. Chesser at the time. And I had gone to a few of their lectures and community conversations, and there were some things that I was like super passionate about that they had talked about. And there were some things that I knew that I thought were best for kids that were missed opportunities from my different experiences. So I wrote this big long essay, you know, um, and it was interesting because it resonated with Dr. Poe and Dr. Chesser, who had just come back from I think Finland and a couple other places around the world. They'd been out to California to see a bunch of different schools. And at that time, we had really high achieving schools. Boone County High School was named, had one of the highest ratings, as did Ryle and Cooper, that you could get on your state assessments. And so, since we were doing so in that, they wanted to do something more. They wanted to take a look at what they're doing internationally, take a look at, there's a lot of professional development on what were the jobs of the future. And so they wanted to create a new school. So over that year, we got together, and there was a lot of conversations on what that new school, the things that would have. We were all very passionate about project-based learning. We were all very passionate about student agency, right? Giving students voice and letting them kind of take control. We respected standardized tests, so we didn't want to like eliminate those by any means, but we didn't want to just chase test scores with the new piece. We wanted to find different ways to assess kids' talents rather than just paper and pencil. Um, and we were looking at like different things for competency, like how you can accelerate and pieces like that. And I think probably one of the biggest passions that I had, and this time Dr. Poe specifically saw it, was in dual credit. I had really gotten involved with post-secondary institutions to see what that did, and so what that could do for kids. So what we set about doing is we started doing different programs, and we started an college program. We started the virtual school that you have now, which is Excel, that actually started, and we had our first graduation that year. We had a school design. I was really passionate about the field of design. I got a lot of friends and family that are designers, and one of the things that was killing me is when people would say there's no future in art, which in Greater Cincinnati there's nothing sillier you could say. The branding agencies employ, there's 600 artists, and there was like 7,500 job openings when we were doing the work in this field. So as we kind of looked at these different programs, we started a school design, we started early college, we started an engineering program. We looked at other high need areas like fire and EMT. We looked at the success that we were having with the kids at the alternative school. The year before I got at the alternative school, there was 198 suspensions for 98 kids, something like that. And within a year of trying some of this project-based approach, we dropped that down to 60 suspensions, but we were servicing 200 kids. By the time we were done there, we had dropped suspensions down to about 0. So from 198, we were serving about 300 kids annually. So we knew our methods between the different programs like early college, virtual school, the school of design, what we were doing at the alternative school. If they could be packaged together in one school, we could have a whole new program, right? We could have kind of the school of the future. So at that time, what we did is we began drawing up plans. It's interesting how many people don't realize this, but we worked with the architect and we drew up plans for a school over at to basically renovate even a bigger deal than the renovation that happened at the alternative school. There was going to be an elevator on the backside. There's additional classrooms. There was these creative spaces that they wanted with flexible rooms. It was going to be about a $10 million project, I think, at that time. And then there was another drawings that were made to put on the campus where Ackerman Middle, Ackerman Elementary, and the Boone County offices, where that's the soccer field was. I was going to have like a big kind of glass entryway. And as they were drawing up that second set of plans for that, Toyota makes the announcement to the superintendents, and they were all kind of taken by surprise that they were going to leave the area. And when they left, they were going to leave some sort of big gift to education. Now, a lot of people thought this was going to be a financial gift or something like that. But we kind of waited to see what they were going to say, to see if they would support kind of this new initiative that we had. And then what they did is they came back and they had Toyota, the places where they were leaving to in Plano, Texas, they saw Texas Instruments had left their building to create a school. And so they pitched the idea of, what about leaving the building? And Dr. Poe recognized that first and foremost, if there was a school that was going to take on this building, it was going to, it was in Boone County's district. So that was an advantage. When Kenton County initially declared they didn't want to have anything to do with it with the previous superintendent, that left really Campbell County or a bunch of small schools that didn't really have the size or means. So Dr. Poe waited, and eventually there was conversations with Toyota, and we were offered the building under a couple of circumstances. One, Toyota wanted to be a building that would be open to all students. They didn't want any kind of like testing requirement to get into Ignite. So, and we hold true to that. That's why we don't have academic testing to qualify for Ignite. They wanted to be a place that also produced kids for the schools of the future. They really actually weren't interested in where we they're not responsible for us taking on the careers that we did, but that was, the schools of the future and career training was something that they were interested in. And mostly, as we'll probably talk about here in a little bit, is the soft skills. But then the big one was they want us to find some kind of mechanism that schools from around students from around Northern Kentucky and even Cincinnati and Indiana could participate in Ignite. So those are the three major stipulations. And so that worked really well. Dr. Poe came back to me, and I had been working on an innovation application for a new school. And he asked me to finish editing that, and that's what we submitted ultimately to Toyota. And Toyota looked over the proposal. It had most of the features that you see in the school today. We had already decided to kind of start a school like this called Imagineering. Everybody thinks Imagineering was the first piece of this. It actually wasn't. The Imagineering was one of many programs that we led. Imagineering was important because what we did there is we showed how you can do this education with kids that were dropout concerns, right? So it was more of an extension of the alternative school. So we put this together. Toyota said they loved the proposal and they wanted to do it. And then about the same time that happened, the previous governor, Governor Bevin, had announced that the state was going to release $100 million for schools to take on career education. And so we took our proposal that we submitted to Toyota. It looked very much like what we were doing, what the state wanted. We resubmitted that, but one of the things that we really emphasized in this proposal to Toyota was our dual credit approach. As we go through here, I'll tell you about why dual credit is so important, so valuable, but they really like that. The fact that we had a plan where kids could graduate with an associate's degree. And again, we also were demonstrating this. By this time, we already had a few dozen kids graduate with associate's degrees from the different schools, kids that were leaving with 60 to 70 college hours before they graduate. We were finding ways for kids that had low ACT scores to be successful in these classes, kids from free and reduced lunch populations to be successful in these classes. And this really resonated with the governor and his people in their plan. And so we wrote a grant and we received $7 million from them. So between that grant and the gift from Toyota, which almost happened simultaneously, we're talking about 3 or 4 months difference from start to end, we forged forward. So now we're into 2018, and Kenton County has a new superintendent. And one of the groups over there that I had a lot of respect for was Dr. Francis O'Hare and Dr. Julie Whitus. They were doing some really good things with their with their academies. And the hardest piece for us with what we were doing in Boone County was how do we keep that one part of the proposal to Toyota, which was to make the school open to the region. How do we keep that promise? And so Dr. Webb approached our school about bringing the academies over here. And then Dr. Poe talked to me and had me go over and work with Kenton County for about a period of 6 months to figure out how we could take our plans and kind of merge a little bit what we were doing together. And we really came up with a pretty fantastic product. I think the big thing that we did is organizational. It's always easy to have ideas, but taking those ideas and putting them down on paper, forging how things are going to work. There's never always the perfect situation, but what ultimately would get us there, the good and bad was weighed for months in and out, a lot of very hard work, and we came up kind of with what you see now, which is Ignite. The neatest thing that I think that we did in that process is we really laid out strategically how kids over 6 to 7 different career fields could get an associate's degree. We came up with a system that is rigid, right? Like it has very specific features to it, but still has enough flexibility for a lot of student choice to do things. And so that was in 2018-19. We put together this plan to basically finalize what Ignite is. And so Ignite is a STEAM school. We use science, through science, technology, engineering, math, and art. We activate the school, we grow student interest in the high need, high growth fields of the future and really present. When we started the school, there was 50,000 job openings within a 50-mile radius of Boone County for the careers that we chose. And that's computer science, engineering, education, allied health, biomedical sciences, and design. So we push that. And one of the pillars of our school then is career training. And those are the careers that we train kids for. It doesn't mean they're all going to end up being that, but it does give them enough experience to say, hey, I want to do this for the rest of my life, or I don't. The second pillar of Ignite was projects. That was something we had shown all over. We did some really cool projects, real world stuff with students. That was featured on all kinds of news programs. Kenton County had been doing those same things with their students for years. And then the third pillar was what I've talked about a little bit, was dual credit. And later on in the program, I'll talk about again why that's so important. And then the last piece was personalization. So that's kind of what Ignite is. And that's how we started. And then we started in 2019, and then 7 months later, we entered the pandemic. So it was an interesting time for us.
Well, you mentioned early on or alternative education, and I can say from my conversations with people in community and in education as well, that alternative education is not defined the same way from person to person. And I find that most seem to equate alternative schools with the place for the bad kids to be.
Yeah, and I think that's unfortunate. Now, I will tell you, I do get that, right? Because there are some like, you put me in the wrong environment, and I'm sure if we ask any adult, what environment can we put you in that's going to make you feel uncomfortable, not wanting to be there and acting out, right? So there are people where a traditional program doesn't work, and you see that manifested through bad behaviors sometimes, and those are the kids that end up oftentimes lashing out, doing things they shouldn't, that end up being at the alternative school. But they're not the only kids that aren't engaged with the traditional field, right? Like, you get kids that are bored, you get A and B students that just have no friend, there's all kinds of things. And the kids that aren't engaged with the traditional education, I think, are the ones that are ripe for an alternative route, right?
Now, and I'm
So,
guessing that per the conversation here that you would classify Ignite as an alternative school.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
100%. Because that's sometimes people get nervous to classify it as alternative because of the stigma, but I
Yeah,
classify it as alternative.
and that's the thing too. I don't think you would just classify Ignite as an alternative school, right? Like, I would classify Craft Academy, as a alternative school. That's featured in U.S. Newsweek, as a great place to go. I would, Gatton would be an alternative school. We're talking about places that don't have traditional classrooms, that don't have traditional blocks, don't have traditional time. All those features of, you see 7:30 to 2:30, of a school day with 6 blocks or 4 blocks. Anything outside of that that has maybe just a little bit different goals, I would consider that an alternative education field. And to me, that's kind of the, I mean, I've always kind of enjoyed creative pursuits. And one of the neat things with alternative education is, I constantly tell people Ignite's a great school, and I can promise you a lot of things. But I can also promise you that there's kids that other schools might be a better fit for. Maybe that's a traditional school, but there's other alternative ways to do school. I mean, this is draft 6.0 from where we started. Draft 2 and 3 are pretty fantastic as well, right? So yeah, alternative school, and maybe we got to find
Another
another
term.
term for that because there is that alt school of kid did something that should get them suspended. They don't want to expel them, but they can't be on the same campus, and that's where they're going. Like there's reasons for that connotation, but the truth is, Ignite's an alternative school. It it's their alternative education is not
A
all for
bad
the
word.
kids. And I think too, this is kind of the other thing that Ignite sometimes gets played into is they'll call it a charter school. You know, there's two things with charter schools, right? Like, charter school systems as a way to break the back of traditional educators and the reasons people go into teaching and things like that, just to eliminate the system. That stuff's bad, right? But a charter school with the intent to, and they're not to give people choice and things like that because there's different needs that are out there or different goals that you want. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but what I think is that you could have that school choice concept within a public system, and I think Ignite shows that. I think the work that we did at the alternative school with Joe Hibbett shows that. I think Kenton County and Boone County's early college programs show that. So and that's kind of one of the neat things about public education within the system and within our rules with from the state of Kentucky. There is a lot of flexibility to do things that no one's ever done before, do things that we know should be done, right?
Well, you mentioned earlier on project-based learning, and I know my kids and were introduced to it by a wonderful teacher, Miss Blevins at North Point Elementary, who had a master's degree in project-based learning. And this is an elementary school level. And both of my kids went through that format with her while they were in elementary school. And I really was surprised at how amazing it was for my kids. I was also surprised at how different parents reacted to that project based learning model. How would you describe project based learning so parents can understand it to get ready for that kind of environment for their kid? Because it's a culture shock when you're coming from a traditional classroom.
Right. So on project-based learning, and anything we do as adults is all project-based, right? And so one of the big goals that you're trying to do with project-based learning is to activate those content areas that we know the kids need to have, but do it in a holistic way so that they're combining, say, English with math. They're combining, social studies with science. Because not everything we do as adults is in a silo, and oftentimes in our educational practices, we put goals and objectives in silos. So that's one super important objective of project-based learning. But I'll tell you, there is a difference between good projects and bad projects, things that are worth doing, and in my opinion, things that aren't worth doing. And luckily, I had great mentors with Dr. Poe and Dr. Chesser. I think it also helps that I went to graduate school for science, where that's all you're doing is projects in the science field, and you start recognizing how much learning comes as a part of that. And so my belief in it is steadfast. I'm not apologetic. I don't apologize for knowing that PBL is important. But I will say this: PBL can be watered down. PBL can be wish-washy. And I think the philosophy that I really liked at the time, I watched a presentation by the people at High Tech High when it first started. And the guy said this: he said, with our projects, we like to do things that are relevant. We don't like to do dumpster projects, which means, that shadow box that you and I probably did when we were in third grade of, you know, of you know, the blue whale or
Or the
the
solar
outsiders
system.
or something, you know what I mean? Like some book like that. Um, the that's not what we're looking for, right? But if you one of my favorite projects ever that we engaged at in the alternative school was we were building crooked playhouses out of math, right? We had an educator in the district pitch us on doing a playhouse for her niece. The niece at the time, she had a terminal illness and she had 7 siblings. And it was like she's telling the story and like we absolutely we're going to build this, and then the kicker was that they were in the child lived in Michigan. We need to figure a way to get that up there, right? So how do you build a playhouse, take it apart, assemble it up in Michigan? And I remember Dr. Hibbett looking at me. He's like, "Man, we got to do this. It's all the more cooler to pull this off, right?" So you have all these real world issues. We got a project. We got a kid that really wants it. We got all these kind of variables that we got to take in. And then another part of the project is how do we get it on the truck and how do we get it up there? How do we disassemble it and reassemble it and build it? How do you make it entertaining for the whole, siblings, right? And to me, that was one of the best project-based learning experiences ever. It was meaningful. It was important to that child. It was important to that community. And that's not something I think that from what I understand, that was 2016, 15, and the Playhouse is still standing in a good condition. And the family still, the youngest kids are still enjoying it. And that's really good project-based learning. If you come on our campus, you can see the different projects that our kids do from making amusement park rides that, 500 to 1,000 people ride on any given weekend to building airplanes. So we like to do things where, if you do have to throw it away, you're going to have tears, right? So doing things that are relevant and important to your community. Another great examples are Northern Kentucky Political Forum. We saw that local elections, there's not a lot of debate opportunities. There's not a lot of questions and answer sessions. And so Darren Smith, when we were looking at ways to incorporate project-based learning into the social studies field, that was a way to make that curriculum relevant and real, right? So, in a nutshell, if you tell people that we try to do relevant and real projects that have impact on the community with our PBL, that resonates.
Well, I do have to say, as a parent of a student who just completed their first year at Ignite, that the YLP was a very interesting adventure to have with her. Um, so what I did like was by the end of that year, they had completed a project from start to finish. They had to work as a team in this case, and they had a lot of projects along the way that really helped enhance what they were doing. And what was cool was that at the end of the year, all of that went on their resume. And I don't know how many different schools have projects where that is something that you could say that the projects are resume worthy. But that might be different in different colleges. But being in the design college, I was pretty impressed with that element of it. That she's here at the end of her first year of school at Ignite, and she's got a working resume.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's kind of enough. I mean, again, I could list about 30 different bullet points that are important, right? That resume building aspect of it is. I'm willing to bet the level of frustration that your daughter had going through her project was high at times. The fear sometimes with kids when they have to go and present. I mean, think about like that anxiety of studying for a test and having to do it now. Apply that to a project, right? So when we talk, sometimes I think when people think about project-based learning, they think about love and tie-dye, and we're just going to do some finger painting. Like that's not what it is. I mean, it's you know the YLP process is not easy. It's hard. It's important, and it makes the kids better. You know, they're judged by industry professionals. They give them feedback. The students respond to it. And one of the other cool things that I like about our projects, because what we're always trying to do is make sure what we're doing is quality work and make sure what we are doing is what is really needed in industry. So having those industry professionals come in, judge and give feedback is crucial. We have become members of an organization called the Technology Student Association. They give us a lot of challenges. Our students do those projects in those challenges, which are aligned with what we're doing already. But now what we're seeing is that our kids are, we have from the design program this year, I think we have 11 kids that are competing in nationals for their projects that came out of the YLP process, right? And truth be told, if they allowed more of our students to go down, they only allow you to send two teams per group. But if we were allowed to send more, we'd probably be sending 25 kids, to nationals because our kids' work was so much better than what you saw across the state.
Yeah, I have to say that just going to the Makers Expo and things and seeing some of the finished products and going to the robotics competition and seeing those kids in action, it's astounding what they're
Yeah.
accomplishing. And that leads us into the next segment here, which is something that you are very passionate about and something that I've always admired about Boone County schools in general. But I feel that Ignite really carries the banner for this, and that's the dual credit side of things. And I know all high schools offer dual credit, but Ignite is really centered around dual credit. And I really like to say that when I describe what Ignite does and in comparison to other schools, is I really think that you have managed to create a program here with your team that has hacked college, essentially, in my opinion, because the process these kids go through now, you have 80 to 100 kids graduating with associate's degrees or getting an associate's degree before they can even graduate high school. That's a miracle, in my opinion, based off of my experience, which was the traditional way of waiting until you graduated and then going into a 4-year institution and racking up debt and having to spend the rest of your adult life trying to pay it off and hoping that your education doesn't get outdated. Um, that is something that you've managed with your team at Ignite to really push for, is this early college. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and why dual credit is different than AP and how you know the difference between what do you need? What should your child go for? Should they go for a dual credit centered education, or should they go for something that's more advanced placement?
Yeah. So I would I'm this can be sometimes a controversial statement, but there is no way that I would push my kid into an AP situation over dual credit. I would do dual credit all the time. Now, if dual credit isn't available, AP is the next best thing. But in the state of Kentucky and in this region, in Cincinnati and Ohio, we have the data strongly to support the effectiveness of dual credit and increasing college graduation rates. Now, this was my anecdotal experience with college programs. I was at Lloyd. We had just started we had graduated some really talented classes. We were just talking about this earlier today. We had students that graduated with an ACT scores, top 20 kids. It was like 28. It was like a really talented group of kids, um, at least when it came to tests. Now, those kids didn't have access to any dual credit, right? Then a few years later, they started a dual credit program. Now, I love loved all the kids that I had at Lloyd, but it's objectively their academic achievement in those later years, 4 years down the line, 5 years down the line, wasn't close to those first 2 years that I was there. Their average ACT score in the top 20 of the class was like a 22. Okay. So you're talking about a 6 point difference, more or less. But what I saw is we did 4 dual credit classes that one year. And um, the following year, the kids that were juniors got to do 2, and then they did 4 their senior year, and they graduated with 6. And because I traveled with a lot of students, I used to do international trips and things like that with them. I would stick with them as they went to college and graduated. And what I saw is these kids are all graduating from college. Like the ones that had the lower ACT scores, they were graduating 4 years to 3.5 years. Meanwhile, my students that had that 28, we were lucky. Like in the top 20, I would see them. Most of them left college, and it had nothing to do with with the inability to handle it. Most of those kids had 3.0s, 3.5s, 4.0s, and they left college. And the reason is college is expensive. And the second reason is they would change majors, and now they'd be looking at another 4 years, right? And when you come from a working class family, that 20,000, that $10,000, your ability to support yourself, you just don't have that, right? Like it wasn't a reality to continue to go into risky levels of debt and for a career that you might not want. So it was heartbreaking seeing these kids that had the ability to get through, but what what would have been nice is if they had the ability to have some flexibility, right? To double major, triple major, or if they got into something that they didn't like, there wasn't as big of consequences with switching to majors. So my students that had that flexibility, and they all told me it was because of dual credit, they're graduating in 4 years. So this was incredible to me. So then I was lucky enough to meet with Xavier. And Xavier University was they had a program with us at Boone County, and they're getting ready to pull out, and because of their accreditation issues with their school. And I sat down to meet with Dr. Mendel, was his name, over at Xavier, and he shared with me a couple of things. One is that all colleges sit on these incredible data sets that they have to keep um, to provide so that they can get financial aid, so that they're eligible for federal financial aid. And we're talking about how many African American students graduate in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. How many students whose family income is between 60 and 100,000? I mean, there's just thousands of different variables that they have to keep. But the data set that blew me away is that they found when kids had 18 hours of dual credit, those kids graduated 78% of the time in 4 years or less. When kids have 30 hours of dual credit, they graduate at 98% of the time in 4 years or less. Now, this is incredible. I know some people are like, yeah, that seems kind of obvious. It's not obvious, right? Because if it was obvious, every high school in the state of Kentucky and the state of Ohio would stop doing AP and they'd immediately switch to dual credit. And I honestly think it's a travesty that they haven't. When you have this kind of solid data that says when these kids graduate with these hours, they're going to graduate from college 98% of the time. Now, I looked at Xavier, and Xavier said, we're not the only ones that keep this data. I guarantee NKU has the data. I can't tell you what it'll say. So we go to NKU, we go to Thomas More, we go to UK, we go to Louisville, we go to Moorhead. They all have the same data, and all that data is saying the same thing. Kids have 18 to 30 hours. Their chances go from 78 to 99% of the time they're graduating in 4 years or less. That is insanity. There are so many schools that focus on AP. There are so many schools that focus on ACT. What that basically means, if I had a group of kids over here in one hand, and all those kids had 30 ACTs, 100 kids with 30 ACTs and 0 dual credit hours, versus another 100 kids with 22 ACT scores, and they have 30 dual credit hours, that group with the 30 dual credit hours is going to graduate 4 years or less, way more than the high ACT group, right? And so when you think about what we've been doing at schools and preparing for kids and calling programs rigorous, that's been the direction, right? So now I've kind of jumped a little bit forward, but at the time in 2017, the other data that was overwhelming, both from our community conversations and from the colleges, was graduation rates in the state of Kentucky. Graduation rate in the state of Kentucky is based on 6 years at these colleges. And they are, at the time, UK had the highest, and it was like 58% of the kids that go to UK were graduating in 6 years or less. There wasn't a single other school that was over 50%. And when you took the data and you looked at the 4-year graduation rates, most schools were in the low 20s to mid-teens. In fact, some schools were in the low teens, right? So think about that. Going to UK, going to NKU, spending $10,000-$15,000 a year, in tuition, and what you thought was going to be 4 years turns into 6 years. So then you start talking to the parents, and this is the student loan debt. That's why it started getting ballooned and out of control. And none of it had to do with whether or not the kids could pass the classes. It all had to do with they didn't want to, they chose that they want to be a nurse, and now they don't want to be a nurse. They want to be, a doctor, or they want to be an engineer. And when you don't have the flexibility to change majors or start off in 2 different majors, that limits your ability to graduate on time, right? So I took this to Dr. Poe and Karen Chester. We kept messing around with the data to make sure that we had it right. And we created an early college program. And our goal at the time, this is where it gets really cool. Our goal at the time was to tackle 30 hours, right? We wanted to just go after the general ed classes. And I will tell you, people make all kinds of jokes about politics, but there's one really great thing that the state of Kentucky did and the politicians did is they passed, I think in 2010, Senate Bill 160, which basically said if you take a general ed at one school, it has to count at all the other schools, right? And if you complete your gen eds, you're gen ed certified, and another school can't come up with extra gen eds for you. So our goal is to tackle these 30 to 35 gen eds that were at most schools. So as we do this, we create the program called Early College that was at Boone County. Now, this is the part that's awesome. You had a junior year and you had a senior year. And there was a young lady by the name of Alexis Knoll. And Alexis came to me and she said, Mr. Gels, I've looked at this. Your program is set up for 48 hours. I said, yeah. And we get 48 hours done 4 days a week within 4 hours of the school year, with the 4 days of the school week, with the exception of Fridays where we have that one lab. If I take 4 more classes, I think I can pull off an associate's degree. I hadn't looked at this before. She was the first kid to look at it. So we sat down and went over the paperwork, and she was the first one to graduate with the associate's degree. And she paved the path for other kids to get the associate's degree, right? And so the following year we had 4, then we had 15, then we had 18 kids from early college graduate with the associate's degree. And that was why we were able to take that awesome work, it was all student initiated, student agency, and carry it over to what we do at Ignite, right?
Well, I do have to say that going to the graduations over the weekend, this past weekend, it was great to see so many kids either walking up college ready or with associate's degrees. Not just the kids from Ignite, but just
Right.
kids that are.
That's probably one of my biggest pride points, and then Kenton County replicated what we did here. They took it over to NKU's campus, right? And so it's started small and it's spread across the state now. Like the colleges are trying to figure out how to respond to it because there's not enough kids available to take the arts and sciences classes for which they have professors for. Like they told me at UK, it could lead to about a 10% to 15% cut in the number of teachers that they need, which I don't want to see people lose their jobs over it, but this allows colleges to be more efficient and save money, like you said, it's hacking college and it's effective. It works. The impact, one of the other parts I was told like, oh, it's not rigorous enough. Their ACT scores will drop. Our kids in the first 4 years, their ACT scores rose. They rose like crazy. We had kids go up 4 and 5 points. And the reason I think, is because when you start getting those college classes, you're getting the best effort out of a kid, and those professors, at least the ones we work with, are really good at pinpointing the exact skills that they want to develop in the kid through their rubrics. We talk about performance-based education, and this is about as close as you get to it right now in Northern Kentucky, is a really well-written syllabus for some of those classes. So the expectations are clear. The kids meet those, they grow, they're rigorous, and their academic achievement has been fantastic as a result.
Yeah, I just actually got Sophie's first syllabus today. So reading that, I would agree with you. They are very clear. I wish my syllabuses or syllabi, whatever you call them in college, were that clear.
Yeah,
Um,
and I will say it's neat. Gateway does a good job. Thomas More does a great job, and NKU do a good job at calibrating their classes, so it's a similar experience. So History 108 looks the same. There's a lot of training those professors get, on how the kids can learn, what's the best expectation. But you're right, like the syllabuses they have look nothing like I had when I was in college.
and I think in college years ago, it was 1 page, and this one was about 4.
Yeah,
And it actually had some expectations outlined on some of the larger projects, which I appreciated as a parent of a, now incoming sophomore that's taking her first college class, to be able to see what she's in for, to be able to help with that if necessary, or to keep her on task. Um, but that was impressive. I was very, very pleased to see that. And I like the relative ease of introducing the kids into the dual credit environment.
right.
I think that
Here's another thing too, like the retention rates for freshmen at colleges that don't have dual credit, they're generally miserable, right? Um, what the nice thing about dual credit, I don't know, you could probably talk about your worst semester, but I know if I had my mom and dad looking at my grades, or someone there, a coach, looking at my grades, which I played football in college, so I was lucky to have a coach that looked at our grades. Um, it just is, there's another level of accountability, right? And so while we can't really monitor and the Gateway wants our hands off, we're still involved to a certain extent, right? And the kids, when they're living at home, they have their parents looking over their shoulders, and all that stuff, all those kind of supports helps show the kids that they can do it, right? Like you can be successful. You're smart enough in these classes. You just got to do what's asked. And so I just think that's that early introduction really, really helps out kids. So Sophie, when she goes away for college, she's going to already build so much confidence, have so much knowledge about where to find things, that the syllabus is really important and what's laid out in the syllabus is crucial. And that's what you need to understand. Those deadlines are important. that I think those non-tangibles um, are also reasons you see these kids that have these hours be successful when it comes to um, post-secondary, the rest of their post-secondary education.
Well, that's going to get us to the next piece here, which will be enrollment, because I know one of the things I get a question on frequently is how do they enroll into Ignite, which that's pretty self-explanatory if you go to the website, igniteinstitute.org. Um, or the next question is, how do they select which kids get into the program? Because people seem to think that you're only selecting the top 5% of their class type
Yeah,
thing in terms of how the standards for bringing them in. But I know that the standards are a little more complex than that. Can you get into that a little bit?
yeah. So we don't look at academic criteria, right? So that we hold that true. Um, we do. It is competitive program, right? Like so.
Pause 1 second. Why do you not look at academic criteria? I think that'll be the first question out of a parent's
So
mouth.
not only, and that is a hard one. Like I get emails all the time. Like, and I'm getting a ton of them this summer, right? Like my child's a straight A student. They've got nothing but A's, and I don't understand, why they're not in the school, right? And so you got to tell them, like, look, the straight A's doesn't. That's not what we look at, or they might have a friend that they know struggles in school academically, and that child got in, but their child didn't get in. So what's going on there? So here's what it is. Um, we have a wait list right now of about 400 students. So any given year for 300 spots, we have somewhere around 700 to 1,000 kids that apply, right? Um, Now, some years, because what we have also seen, if we have 1,000 kids apply this year, we send out so many waitlist letters that everybody thinks it's impossible to get in. So the following year, we'll have less applications, right? We might have like 700 applications the following year, and then more kids get in, and then the next year we get, because everybody knows like that apply, like, hey, we got in, there's more positivity. The following year we'll get a lot more applications. So it's kind of ebb and flow with how many applicants we get each year, right? But it's generally between 700 and 1,000. Now, with that being said, we do score applications, and we score them on the following things. The first one is attendance. So we run your attendance. We look at unexcused only, right? So if you have unexcused absences, you get points deducted. If you have perfect attendance or all your attendance have been excused, you get a perfect score there. But one of the main reasons for that one is we're a school. We have maybe 70 miles between the kids that live furthest away, farthest end of Boone County to the farthest end of Kenton County. We're not a neighborhood school, so I can't drive down the street to get you, and check in on you. So reducing the kids that have a history with attendance issues is important, and also we think it's a fair thing for kids to compete. The second one is behavior. So when you're in 7th grade at Christmas, all the way till December of the following year, we look at your behavior, and we think that's reasonable, right? Like if you're a kid and you've been nice, you've done what you're supposed to do in school, you've never been caught with a vape, you've never been, you know, picking on a student or something like that. We think it's reasonable that you deserve more points on your application than someone that did. Now that's not to say that we eliminate kids with behavioral issues, because we got kids that have done things that are here. It just means your score isn't going to be as higher, right? The third thing is recommendations. Recommendations are really important. We score those recommendations. Those go in as part of their score. And then the next part is the essay questions. All right. Now you can submit an essay or you can submit a video, and we have a rubric for how we grade those. What we're looking for there is a few things. Number one is that you know something about the school. You know what we do, right? You've looked into it. You know that we have colleges. You know that we're a cohort system, and there's enough knowledge that you're jumping into something that you're aware of what you're getting into. The next thing that we look at is how much are you demonstrating what you want to do in the future. Are you really passionate about being engineering? So like if you apply for the engineering program, but you write like, man, I can't wait to be a medical doctor, you're not going to score very high, right? And then the last big thing that we're looking for in there is, does your application, do your essays, or does your video performance, because you don't have to write, you can also just do a video submission, does it show a willingness to want to do something different, right? If you and your parents come in expecting 5 days a week a lecture, Ignite's not the school for you. If you come in not being expected that you're going to be graded on, how well you work in a group, you're going to be graded on, your presentation style, your research, how accountable you are. Do you show up when you're supposed to show up? Like, those kinds of things are important with how we do it. It's very important that you show on your application that you're willing to, you are looking for something different than a traditional education, right? And that's it, really. So then we score those. It's a lot of work, as you can imagine. You got teachers, all hands on deck. We have the teachers in each college grade the essays. I don't do anything in the process whatsoever. I'm not allowed to grade essays. It's just all the teachers. And then we rank. They go in. The scores go in. We rank. Now we do. We take an even number of kids that had Algebra 1 versus 8th grade math. So we're not taking in just all the greatest kids at math, so that we do get a pretty good even split. Now, I don't know how we've done it, because it's mostly just a prayer. We recruit really hard, and we make sure that kids from diverse backgrounds have a good experience when they're here. But in doing this, without a quota system or anything like that, we have managed to have a population that you might label financially at risk at 36%. And we have a minority presence at our school that's about 17, 18% in any given year, which those two numbers out of the 8 schools that we work with, that puts us at number 4, right? We're the 4th most diverse, and we have the 4th greatest amount of economic challenge. And that's something we're really proud of, right? And we're always trying to find ways to, number one, make sure that the kids that come from free and reduced backgrounds experience is great, and make sure kids that come from diverse backgrounds is great. And then we utilize them to help recruit others. And when you look at the top 20 schools in the state, we have the greatest amount of diversity and economic diversity. And we have, one of the highest achievement numbers. I think we were 2nd in the state last year.
Well, I am personally proud of those numbers. I think that for an elite school like Ignite, that's something very special to talk about. And I do like the way that you do the enrollment process, and I respect the priorities that you all place on how you all select kids to be in the school. But I do want to ask really quick before we move on to the lightning round, which is more designed for any students that might be listening. But the last question I want to ask is there something that's coming up that's pretty exciting at Ignite that you want to talk about? That, like something that people should be watching out for?
Oh, I mean, there's all kinds of things. I'm really excited about some of the different programs we're doing. That free and reduced lunch population, having some focus on those students. We saw that group, only 26% of the kids at one point were earning dual credit classes. This year we're up to 78%. Next year we're going to be at 90%. But what's neat is once we pursue and looked at how we can make that happen, we found opportunities not just for those kids, but for all kids, right? So there's all kinds of summer things that we're getting ready to tap into, not this summer, but ready for next summer, because everything takes about a year to get done. And this is going to really be special for kids. But I know the big thing that's really exciting for our kids is going to be a change that we're making next year to what's called an I-block. One of the hardest things about Ignite is our cohort. One of the best things, but one of the hardest things on the kids is our cohort model. Our cohort model allows you to be with the same group of kids and the same teacher for all your classes over the 4 years. Now, it makes for very tight relationships. We know everything that we can about the kids. They know everything about us. They know about their classmates. But what it can feel is a little bit isolating. Like, I remember I had a young lady come to me last year and said, "Mr. Gels, I don't want to leave Ignite, but there's something I feel we're missing." And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, my class, it's almost all girls." Like, "Yeah." And she said, I really want to meet some boys to date." I was like, well, it can't get much more specific than that. She went and expressed like the things of opportunities to meet others that she thought she would like to see and have. And we weren't able to put it together this year because we couldn't find a model that really worked for us. But we traveled out west this year and we saw other schools doing this that similar to us that do like this thing called an I-Block. So one of the coolest things that we're going to have this next year is a way for kids to sign up over month and a half, month periods to be in classes with kids that they're not normally in classes with, right? Which stress is another thing that we talk about here because, my kids do work hard, they do care about what they do, but, life is not all about what you know, it's also about who you know, right? And so this is going to allow our kids a heck of a lot more social interactions, and they deserve it. And we're excited that we're going to be offering that. So,
Well, I know that it got a good review from my kiddo. So
yeah.
just the sample that you all did on the last day of school. But here's the lightning round. This is 10 questions that I will be asking every guest on the show. And you only can answer with 3 words
Okay.
or less. You ready?
Yep.
Okay. If you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be?
George Remus.
Really?
Yep. I run the gangster tours downtown and the Cincinnati things. He was a big bootlegger, and I've gotten to study him a lot. So he's a fascinating guy. So George Remus, if you know anything about him, he's the number one.
What was your favorite subject in school?
History.
If you could choose one superpower, what would it be?
High metabolism. Whatever I want.
What is the one product you cannot live without?
Coke Zero.
What was your favorite book as a kid?
Oh, that's trying to think of like my evolution as a reader. You know, the outside here, I own a tour company. Sorry to give you an explanation, so there's really anything weirdo with this one, but the Amityville Horror book was one that really got me interested in reading, and Snell's Lot. So I'd probably a toss up between those two.
Well, that'll get thumbs up from our household.
All right.
Who's your favorite musical artist?
Oh, Taylor Swift.
Oh, I knew that one. I just figured. I was going to be surprised if you didn't say that.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite Disney princess?
Ariel. She's got the red hair like my daughter.
What is one ability that you believe everybody should possess?
Flight. We don't have it, but I wish it'd be a lot cooler if we could all fly. I don't know. Optimism.
That's a good one. What is your most useless talent?
I once played a pinball game for 38 minutes straight.
And if you could change your name for one day, what would it be?
Oh,
I didn't say there would be easy questions.
yeah, I don't know. That's a good one. I don't know. Always liked LL Cool J or that'd be pretty cool. I named my daughter Lucy Lee Gels. My friends, man, like your obsession with that guy is too much. So.
I can imagine them calling you LL Cool J at Ignite. So, well, thank you for all of that. But just one final thing. Is there anything that you would like our listeners to know that we didn't talk about today?
We're an open book. If you ever have curiosity about Ignite, just give us a call. Come on up. We love showing the place off, And if it's not me giving you the tour, it'll be one of the students. But we are wide open 24/7. You want to come see the place, just let us know.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jerry, for joining me on the Purple Wave Northern Kentucky, and I appreciate your time. And thank you for all that you do for our kids in Northern Kentucky. And for those listening, please follow the Purple Wave Northern Kentucky on Facebook, on YouTube, and TikTok. And you can find our growing What Does That Mean video shorts library, which will be posting soon, and all future podcasts. And if you have a topic you would like to see, please email thepurplewavengky@gmail.com. And thank you for being with us. And remember that the best way to empower yourself is to educate yourself. Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you.